So, have you ever been at that point with your business? A real crossroads.
Yeah, thinking about launching something new maybe,
Yeah.
where you're seeing customers act differently.
Exactly. And like market research immediately pops into your head. It feels like the smart thing to do.
But then you glimpse the potential cost and, well, it gives you pause, right?
Yeah.
Is this always worth it? Is it even necessary?
That's really the core of what we want to unpack today. It's a question that hits home whether you're bootstrapping a startup or
Or managing a budget in a bigger company? Yeah. We need to figure out when that investment in research really pays off.
and when there might be maybe smarter, more cost-effective ways to get the insights you need.
Definitely.
Because look, whether you're a founder watching every single penny, or maybe someone just trying to get a solid handle on your industry without getting totally swamped.
Or just curious.
Yeah,
Curious about how businesses actually learn this stuff.
right. This deep dive into market research costs, it's really for you. We've been looking at a pretty recent piece by Vinayak Bali for Cognitive Market Research, just published this year.
So it's current thinking, not just old theory. It's looking at this exact issue right now.
Our mission today, then, pretty straightforward.
Yeah, we want to give you a clearer picture. Why can it be expensive?
When is it absolutely critical to spend that money?
And crucially, what are the smart, budget-friendly alternatives out there?
So you can make informed decisions, basically. Get the insights you need without, breaking the bank.
Or worse, missing out on something vital because you were scared off by the potential cost.
Okay, let's get into it then. Why the price tag? What actually makes market research cost so much in the first place?
Well, fundamentally, it boils down to the resources needed for two main things. Getting the data.
Collecting it.
Right, collecting it. And then actually making sense of it all, the analysis part. Neither of those is super simple or cheap.
Okay, so thinking about what we might call, like, traditional methods, what kind of costs are we talking about there?
Okay, take surveys, for example.
Mhm.
Good ones, anyway. To get reliable results, you're often working with specialist research firms.
Right.
They have access to these respondent panels,
Yeah.
groups of people ready to take surveys.
Okay, so getting the right people.
Exactly. Then there's the cost of designing a good survey, one that asks the right questions in the right way, distributing it, and then, yeah, often pretty hefty fees for the statistical analysis afterwards.
So it's not just, like, putting a poll on Twitter.
Oh, definitely not. It's about making sure the numbers mean something, that you've talked to enough people, the right kind of people.
So the findings actually reflect the market, not just, random opinions.
Precisely. And that the questions aren't leading people, biasing the answers.
Gotcha. What about other methods, like talking to people more directly?
Qualitative stuff, yeah. Like focus groups, where you get a small group together for a guided discussion, or in-depth one-on-one interviews.
Those sound like they could give you really rich details.
They absolutely can.
Yeah.
Real depth into thoughts, feelings, but they have their own costs, too. You need skilled moderators to lead the discussion effectively.
Right. Someone who knows how to draw people out.
Yeah. Then maybe renting a space, a venue that's suitable, and you need to offer incentives, compensate people for their time and their insights.
Okay, paying people for their time, expertise, maybe venue costs, that adds up. Now, the article mentioned technology also driving up costs. How does that work?
Yeah, this is where it gets pretty interesting. We're seeing more use of really advanced tools, things like predictive analytics.
So, looking forward, not just back.
Exactly. Trying to forecast what might happen, not just describing what already did. It's like weather forecasting for business trends, kind of.
Okay.
Then you've got machine learning algorithms. They can crunch huge amounts of data, spot subtle patterns a human might totally miss,
Wow.
and real-time tracking tools, watching trends as they happen. But these tools, while powerful, they cost money. Software licenses.
Mm-hmm.
You need skilled people who actually know how to use these complex tools effectively.
Right, the expertise costs money too.
And the computing power, the infrastructure behind it all adds to the bill.
So the more sophisticated the tech, the bigger the investment, pretty much. What if a business has really specific questions, something unique to them?
That's where customization kicks in. If you're in a really niche market or have very particular questions, well, generic research won't cut it.
You need something tailored.
Precisely. So researchers have to design unique methods, write very specific questions or interview guides, analyze the data with your unique context in mind.
That sounds like a lot more work.
It is. All that extra tailoring and specialized effort, it naturally increases the cost. It's not like picking a standard report off a virtual shelf.
Right, bespoke versus off the rack Makes sense. And then there's bringing in the big guns, like an external agency. Why do that if it adds another cost layer?
Well, agencies often bring a lot to the table. They have deep expertise, maybe in specific industries or methods.
Specialized knowledge.
Yeah, and access to proprietary data sources that you might not be able to get on your own. Plus, the sheer capacity to handle really large, complex studies.
So scale and expertise.
And they can manage the whole process, which saves you internal time and effort, especially if you don't have that expertise in-house. But, as the article notes, you pay a premium for that.
So it's a trade-off. Higher cost, potentially, for maybe deeper insights or bigger skill.
Exactly. You weigh the cost against the potential quality and scale you might get.
Okay, so we get why it can be expensive, lots of valid reasons. But the million-dollar question, maybe literally, when does that cost become too much? When does it outweigh the benefits?
The article points to a few key situations. A big one is for, well, businesses on tight budgets, small companies, startups.
One's watching every penny.
Right. They often have limited cash. Shelling out a big chunk for research, especially when the ROI isn't a dead certainty. That's a tough call.
It's a big financial risk, especially early on. That premium agency fee could be a non-starter.
Absolutely. It could seriously strain their resources. So that's a major factor.
Makes total sense. What else suggests the cost might be outweighing the benefit?
Having really clear goals for the research is just fundamental. If you're doing research just because you feel you should,
Kind of ticking a box.
yeah, without a specific question to answer or a clear business objective driving it, that's often a recipe for wasted money.
So you get a pile of data, but
But it doesn't actually help you decide anything. It's irrelevant no matter how much you spent getting it.
yeah.
It's like going grocery shopping without a list. You buy stuff, but maybe not what you needed.
Huh. Okay, yeah, I can relate to that. So research without purpose equals wasted resources. What about how fast things are changing in the market?
Oh, that's critical, especially in fast-moving sectors like tech or, say, fashion.
Things change on a dime there.
Exactly. Traditional research, takes time. Planning, collecting data, analyzing. It's sequential. By the time you get the final report, the market might have already shifted significantly. Your findings could be, well, outdated.
So you paid for yesterday's news, essentially.
Pretty much. In those dynamic fields, the slower traditional methods might just be too slow to justify the cost. You need insights much faster.
Okay, that's a really important point. If the market outpaces the research, bad investment. What about businesses in really specific niches?
Yeah, niche markets are tricky. Those general off-the-shelf market reports, they might be way too broad, not specific enough for your tiny target audience.
Okay.
But then commissioning a fully custom study just for that small niche, that can get incredibly expensive.
Potentially too expensive for a niche business with maybe tight margins already.
Exactly. It's a tough balancing act, getting specific enough data without the cost becoming prohibitive.
Okay, so if traditional expensive research isn't always the answer, what are some of these smarter, more cost-effective ways businesses can get insights?
Thankfully, there are quite a few good alternatives now. The article really flags leveraging online tools that are often readily available.
Like what specifically?
Well, think about Google Analytics. Often free, right? And it gives you tons of info about your website visitors, who they are, how they found you, what they do on your site.
Right. Simple things like which pages are popular, where people drop off. That tells you something.
It tells you a lot. And then you have the analytics built right into social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn.
The places businesses are already active.
Exactly. Especially for smaller businesses, these are gold mines. See how your posts are doing, who's engaging, what topics are buzzing in your audience. You get real insights without big spending. Just the time to look.
Smart. Using the tools already at your fingertips. What about, like, public data? Information that's just out there.
Another great resource. Think about government data, like from the U.S. Census Bureau. Huge amounts of demographic info. Or organizations like Pew Research Center. They publish reports on all sorts of social trends, public opinion. Even sites like data.gov aggregate government data sets.
So free information if you know where to look.
Yeah. If you tap into these free resources and then combine that with your own internal knowledge, what you already know about your customers and your business.
Right, applying your own context.
You can often piece together a really valuable picture without commissioning brand new, expensive research.
It's about being resourceful then, knowing what's available.
Definitely. And don't forget about just asking your customers directly.
Ah, going straight to the source. How do you do that cheaply?
Well, simple feedback forms on your website, maybe after a purchase. Actively keeping an eye on online reviews, Yelp, Google, whatever's relevant.
Just listening, basically.
Yeah, listening to what people are saying about you or your industry on social media.
Mm.
And the free survey tools too. Google Forms, Typeform. Easy ways to ask your audience questions directly.
So you can get that qualitative feedback, the why behind the numbers.
Exactly. Customer preferences, pain points, their general feelings, incredibly valuable and often very low cost to gather.
Okay, so lots of smart alternatives. But let's say a business does decide, okay, we need to invest properly in this research. How do they make sure they get the most bang for their buck? Maximize that ROI.
Strategic planning has to be number one. Before you even think about methods or agencies, you have to define your objectives clearly.
What are we actually trying to find out?
Precisely. What specific questions need answers? Are we trying to find new customer groups? Understand why people aren't buying again. Check out the competition.
Gotcha. Clear goals first.
Having those clear objectives keeps everything focused. You're not just collecting data for data's sake.
Makes sense. Start with the problem, not just we need research. What else helps maximize value?
Prioritize actionable insights over just data volume. The goal isn't a 200-page report that sits on a shelf.
Right, something you can actually use.
Exactly. Extract specific, relevant info that directly helps you make better decisions. The article had a good example. An e-commerce site figuring out preferred payment methods.
Yeah. Knowing people prefer PayPal or Apple Pay, that's immediately useful.
Super actionable. It directly impacts checkout design, potential sales. Way more useful than just general e-commerce trends sometimes.
Okay, focus on actionability. Any other tips for getting good value?
Consider a hybrid approach.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be all or nothing, big, expensive study or are only free tools.
Miss a match.
Yeah, combine smaller in-house efforts with maybe larger outsourced pieces when needed. Balance cost and depth.
How might that look?
Maybe you start with your Google Analytics, some customer surveys using free tools, get some initial findings.
Okay.
Then those findings help you define a much more targeted and probably more cost-effective study for an external agency, if you still need more depth.
Smart. Use the cheaper stuff to focus the more expensive stuff. Find that sweet spot. Now, we've talked a lot about saving money, but the article warned about dangers too, right? Cutting corners too much.
Yes, absolutely critical point. Being cost-conscious is good, but not if it kills the quality and reliability of your insights.
What are the risks?
Well, relying only on free or public data. It might give you a surface view, but it could be incomplete, maybe outdated, or just not granular enough for what you really need.
So not the full picture.
Right. Public demographic data might show broad trends, but miss the specific nuances of your customer segment.
So you save money up front, but risk making decisions on flawed information.
Exactly. And then there's the risk of bias if you do everything in-house, especially without real research expertise on the team.
How so?
You might accidentally ask leading questions, misinterpret the findings, let your own assumptions color the analysis without realizing it.
Okay.
Similarly, using tiny sample sizes in surveys just to save cash. Your results could be totally skewed, not reflecting the broader market at all.
So you base strategy on what a handful of maybe unrepresentative people think. Ouch.
Yeah, it can lead to really bad decisions down the line, even though it felt like saving money initially.
So the DIY approach has hidden dangers if you're not careful.
That's why the article stresses investing in the quality of the process, even on a budget. Validate your sources, use sound methods, and know when to maybe get some expert advice, just to ensure reliability.
Finding that balance between cost and quality makes sense. This has been super helpful just to give us a sense of scale.
Well,
Did the article mention how much is actually spent globally on this stuff?
it did, yeah. Had a fast fact. In 2023, global spending on market research was estimated at over $90 billion US.
Wow. 90 billion, that's huge.
It is. And it also highlighted that digital data collection methods are becoming increasingly significant within that massive total spend.
So big business and increasingly digital. That definitely puts it all in perspective. Okay, as we wrap up this deep dive for our listeners, what's the main takeaway here?
I think the key message is,
Yep.
yes, understand the costs, but also understand the potential value. And crucially, realize that getting valuable insights doesn't always require the absolute biggest budget.
There are smart ways.
There are smart, cost-effective alternatives. And even when you do invest more formally, that strategic planning we talked about, that's key to maximizing your return.
And for you listening, it's really worth thinking about your own situation or your specific context.
Absolutely. Is your market changing super fast? Are you in a tiny niche, just starting out with limited funds?
Those answers really shape what approach makes the most sense for you to get the knowledge you need.
Definitely. And maybe take a second look at those free or low-cost tools we mentioned. Google Analytics, social media stuff, free surveys. Could any of those help with your current questions, like right now?
Or the public data sources, census, Pew Research. What might you uncover there just by looking?
Good starting points.
So as you're mulling over how to get those crucial insights for your own business, here's maybe one last thing to chew on. With all this data becoming more available and these new analytical tools constantly popping up, how do you think the role and maybe the perceived value of that traditional, often expensive market research is going to change in the next few years, especially for businesses like yours?
That's a big question. Definitely something to think about.